instinctively gravitate to being a sports announcer?
Well, the earliest recollection, I was about 8 years old, and we had an old radio on 4 legs with crossbars between the legs, and I would come home to listen to a football game. There weren't other sports on, and I would get a pillow, and I would crawl under the radio so that the loudspeaker and the roar of the crowd would wash all over me, and I would just get goosebumps like you can't believe. And I knew that of all the things in this world that I wanted to be that fella saying whatever, home run or touchdown. It just really got to me.
Well, you know, I associate you in your early days, of course, with Red Barber.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose you had a great feeling for him in a paternal sense, too, that he could have been your dad as far as bringing you through the morass and mire of growing up, you know, which is very tough for a kid in New York.
Red never taught me how to broadcast. He never taught me baseball or anything like that. What he did teach me was, among other things, an attitude. Get there early and do your homework and bear down. Use the crowd. And probably the 2 words I would put together if we were playing word association, Red Barber, I would write next to it, he cared. He really cared. It wasn't like I was just another guy in the booth. He wanted that fella to do well.
Sure.
And he cared.
We just needed somebody to sort of take an inning here and there and just do little things, as I put it, carry our briefcases if necessary. And Scully came in and applied for the job, and he was a very apt young man, and he took right over. He made the most of his opportunity.
You see a youngster who was green, you know, really afraid of where he is. He's afraid of the whole you know, thing that he's involved in, being an announcer. To Red Barber, assistant to Red Barber, probably one of the greatest at that time in the area of announcing baseball.
In 1950, I started on a 1-month option to go to Vero Beach. At the end of the month, they might have left me in the Everglades, but they took good enough care to keep me there 32 years. But in 1951, Walter O'Malley took over the Dodgers. I was the 3rd announcer. I didn't work very much, and I was very unsure of myself and my future. And what amazed me about him and about the organization, he himself, not a vice president in charge of, not a director in charge of, not a secretary, Walter O'Malley, the new president of the Brooklyn Dodgers, called my home and said to me, I realize that with the change of ownership, you might be wondering about your future, and I wanted to take time out to assure you that you will be working with us in 1951. It was an incredible thought. Here I'd been a year and a half out of college, and the thought that with all the things he had to do and with all the things he had on his mind, that he would call this kid in Jersey the 3rd announcer to tell him that you'll be back next year.
It took Walter O'Malley about a month to realize, the same as all of us, that Vinnie was the best, or was going to be the best. And I remember Walter saying to me, do you think we should take a chance with a youngster? I said, well, Walter, I said, you did take a chance with me, and if we can't do it, we'll go down together.
He's a little kid, a lot lighter than he is now, cheeks sunk in. He came up and introduced himself and Vin Scully, and we said, who? What do? Do you work with Charlie DiGiovanni in the clubhouse? He said, no, I'm the broadcaster.
My code of professional living is based on something that I read Laurence Olivier say. Of all the things I have ever read, Olivier had a quote attributed to him, at least, that I have always believed in. And it was basically this in looking at an assignment. Have the humility to prepare, and have the confidence to bring it off. And I know one thing, I prepare out of sheer terror. I am absolutely terrified that I would go on totally unprepared and be a horse's fanny, to be honest.
There's a bunt back to Valenzuela. He looks at his runner and goes after him, making the runner commit himself and tags him out, throws to first, and hits the sliding Reynolds. What a marvelous play by Valenzuela. Valenzuela did what I have seen them try to teach pitchers do for 10 years. He ran at the runner, made the runner commit himself, and tagged him out, and then went head-hunting after the runner at first. All that at 20. He's remarkable. He really and truly is.
You know, I think the thing that has impressed me most, Vinnie, I listen to a lot of ball games, especially traveling as much as I do. And you hear different broadcasters in there, you know, announcing. And you always know who their team is. And the thing that has always kind of been startling to me is that as excited as you might get, one never feels that you are rooting for the home team.
Thank you. Another key, you take a good salesman and give him a great product, he ought to be able to do pretty well with it.
That you have done admirably.
At times I'll be listening to him and I'll say, boy, I wish I could call upon that expression the way he does. He really writes poetry as he watches a game. And what people forget, and even his greatest fans may not recognize, and his old tutor was the one who gave me this insight, and that is that we do, and Vin Scully does, a baseball game for 2 or 3 hours. They turn on a microphone, and 3 hours later he turns it off. And Vin Scully basically doesn't know one word he said. He's calling a game with his eyes, and all those phrases, those marvelous things that he does, go from brain to mouth that quickly. And I'm sure at times even Vin himself will be listening to one of his broadcasts and say, did I say that? I know I do, and I think every announcer feels that way. And that all the more makes him so remarkable in his ability to portray what is happening on the field. He paints the picture more beautifully than anyone who's ever called a baseball game.
When he brings a game home, like the Dodgers, or a really exciting game, whether it means anything or not, he likes to sit up and we talk about it. So there again, that makes our marriage work, because even though I have an early morning carpool, I go to bed early, and then I wake up when he comes home, and we chat for a couple hours and have cheese and fruit, or something that we shouldn't have, but we do, and it keeps us close. I know what he's doing, and he shares my life with the children.
Part about Vinnie is not only is he brilliant at what he does, but when he gets away from his profession, and when he either talks to people, or speaks at dinners, or spends an evening with his friends, he is a remarkable raconteur.
I can honestly say I've known Walter since the early days of 1954, and what really sums up what kind of a man he is would be his second year as manager of the Dodgers. 1955. The Brooklyn Dodgers won their first, and as to be their only world's championship in the history of the borough. And it was a momentous occasion. And that Christmas, I sent out a Christmas card to Mr. and Mrs. Walter Alston, Dartown, Ohio, the manager of the world champion Dodgers. And so help me God, it came back address unknown.
Well, Vinnie and I started out about the same time in Brooklyn, and he was a eager beaver. He was just starting and wanted to get all the details and the players and know as much as he could about it. And he's always been a hard worker. So we came to spring training that year, one of his first years, and you know, in spring training we always have about 400 or 500 ball players around. And we had the veteran team at that time, and so Vinnie knew those guys pretty well. But he came in about a half hour before game time in an exhibition game, and he said, "What's the lineup today, Skip?" And I read off Pee Wee, Reese, Gilliam, Snyder, Campanella, Hodges, and so on. I went on down the list pretty regularly till I got to the 8th man, and I said, "Today, Charlie Jones is going to play." Hit 8th, and he said, who's that? And I pretended I was in a hurry, and I walked away. I said, well, Vinnie, if you're going to broadcast the Dodger games, at least you ought to know the players. And of course there was no Charlie Jones in the 500 of them. And he looked around and went to everybody trying to find out who Charlie Jones was. And I think that's the last time that Vinnie really trusted me all the way.
I would like to publicly thank him for allowing me to manage in the major leagues.
Another chick earned.
only the good years. He actually did. I actually managed, so help me God, in the National League, a Los Angeles Dodger baseball game. The Dodgers had won the pennant on a Saturday night. There was a great deal of celebration. Tremendous amount of alcohol was consumed by one and all. However, there was one more game to be played on Sunday. The game started, and it was a meaningless game against the Milwaukee Braves. And early in the game, to show you that he had changed, this quiet man, this reticent citizen from Dartown, Ohio, suddenly picked up the telephone in the dugout and called our booth. He said to Monty Bancroft, our engineer, ask Vin if he'd like to manage.
I said, well, why don't you take over now and you tell me what to do, and I'll relay the signs on to the players, and we'll see how it works that way.
And Ron Fairley was the hitter, full of champagne. And it was ball 4. And Fairley, he didn't trot to first. He didn't really walk to first. He sloshed to first.
Walter Alston, the manager, told me that day that I was not going to play the next day. So I really celebrated. As a matter of fact, I didn't go to bed that night. And when I went to the ballpark the next day, I got there very early in the morning. I got there about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And I knew I was not going to be in the lineup. But then Wes Parker had an upset stomach. And Alston says, you're in the lineup.
He got to first base, and I thought, what a marvelous idea. And I said, over the microphone, because Alston had headphones on in the dugout so he could hear the play-by-play, let's have Fairley steal.
And I said, okay, if you want to. And I put the steal sign on, and I think Fairley was so shocked that he backed out of off the line, called time, and went over and asked the coach what was going on.
Now, unfortunately, it had taken me so long to say, let's have Fairley steal, that the first pitch was made, and Alston said, dummy, you've got to call it quicker than that. So I said, okay, and for those of you in the ballpark with transistor radios listening, let's have Fairley steal, and watch Fairley's face when he looks over to third and gets the steal sign. Fairley had not stolen a base in several years. So Fairley is at first fighting the hangover and looking down at the ground, and I say, okay, Walter, let's have him steal. Fairley kind of looks up and...
At that particular time, I think you could stick a fork in me. I was done.
And so, there he goes on the first pitch. Luckily, the pitch was fouled off by the hitter. Fairley got down to second several minutes after the pitch. They sent him back, and I said, I always remembered, Walter said, if it's a good play and it doesn't work, come right back with it. So Fairley just about got back to first. And I said, that's what Walter always said, Walt, let's try it again. And Fairley now has got a face that is beet red. And I had said to him earlier before the game, my God, your eyes look terrible. And he said, you should see them from this side. He's standing at first, really ready for the 7th inning retch rather than anything else. And we put the steal on again. And once more, Phil, you know, he's going to go. And he takes off for second base. And would you believe it? The catcher dropped the ball. The catcher for Milwaukee probably had a little more champagne than Fairley, but he dropped the ball. Fairley slid into second base for his only stolen base of the year. And I'm trying to find a way to get off. And the people are laughing in the stands, and I don't want the Braves to think we're making fun of them or anything like that. And so you naturally then say, okay, Alston, I got you this far, you're on your own.
I'll tell you the way I feel about Vin Scully. As a former player, you strive for excellence. And when you see someone that has talent, that achieves that kind of excellence, they make it look so easily. They make it look so easy. And that's exactly the way Vin Scully is. He makes it sound so easy.
A fly ball to Andre Dawson, and deep. Dawson to the track. Dawson to the wall. It's gone. Home run by Rick Monday, and the Dodgers go wild.
For Vinnie to go into the Hall of Fame, I am delighted, and to have been in the Hall of Fame with him, and this is so outstanding, and I'm still one of the proudest guys in the world to be associated with Vinnie, the Dodgers, and the Hall of Fame member.
If you ever get a chance to know him, you're really going to like him.
I just wanted to tell you how very proud I am to have been able to have been part of this tribute to Vin Scully, and in turn to the whole Dodger organization. I hope you've had a pleasant time watching it, and we hope we see you soon at the Dodger ball games.